Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering Girl Boss CEO of Cracker Barrel ruins the stock, tells investors the chain is not relevant anymore. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Investors buy and hold a stock for a few different reasons. One of the main reasons, though, is you've got to have a story to tell about the company. What is the stock story? Why is this stock going to do well in the future, even if it's not doing well now? For example, with startups. Startups generally are not doing well initially. They lose money. It's okay for a company to lose money. Investors understand that. What they don't understand is when you say the company essentially doesn't have a future. And that's what this Girl Boss CEO did. It's one thing to say the company has been struggling lately. We know we need to update what we're doing. We're going to reach out in new directions and get new customer bases and build on our foundation. That gets investors nervous because there's some execution risk there. They don't know if you're going to be able to add to your existing business successfully. But when your stock has been down as much as this company, which is more than 50% over the last year, more than 50% over the last year, they're down at least $1 billion. The one thing you don't want to hear is your CEO telling you, we don't have a future, we're not relevant, we need to spend $700 million renovating the restaurants that we already have to try to turn this into a viable business. But it's definitely not viable the way it is. $700 million for a $1 billion company is way too much money to spend. Telling investors that the company is this messed up is not a solution either. Even if you think it's messed up and you don't have an idea of how this thing could really be turned around in any kind of apparent and compelling way, other than spending $700 million when you're a $1 billion company, then you should resign. You shouldn't tell people, look, don't expect anything because this company is essentially a failure. You shouldn't tell people, look, I'm the right CEO for this job, but I don't even really have a strategy for how to make this company successful. From the New York Post, Cracker Barrel stock in freefall after CEO admits chain just not as relevant as it once was. From NotTheBee.com, Cracker Barrel is tanking under the new Girl Boss CEO, but one guy thinks he knows how to turn it around. They feature two great tweets in this article. One talking about the basic issue. From Sean Davis, Cracker Barrel stock has lost nearly 40% of its value since she was hired as CEO less than a year ago. Leadership matters, and Cracker Barrel doesn't have any. In the last year, and she's been with the company full-time for the last 10 months, the stock is down over 54%. It's a $1 billion company, so that's more than $1 billion lost. Sean Davis continues, as a genuine Cracker Barrel lover, I can tell you its problems are twofold. One, management is completely detached from and often hostile to its customers and their values. And two, there's been a massive decline in the quality of service. Until management understands that Cracker Barrel isn't merely a brand to be managed, that it is an institution that families used to rely on to be a warm, safe, friendly place to get the closest thing to a home-cooked meal away from home, the company and its stock price will continue to decline. The current CEO wants to abandon Cracker Barrel. It sounds like she wants to rebrand it. It sounds like she'd change the logo and everything about it if she could. And maybe that's what she's setting the company up for. Maybe this is just another one of those things where they want to wipe out old, family-based, conservative brands. So they mismanage it until it's completely gone. Perhaps that's what Bud Light was all about. Twitter user Pine Baron, who's also an advertising guy, has some great suggestions for Cracker Barrel. If they did what he suggested, they would have the story that investors are looking for. And that story would be the basis to turn the stock around. From Pine Baron, imagine Cracker Barrel but different. Imagine a CEO who actually loved Midwestern and Southern culture. What about pop-up concerts and endorsements by Zach Bryan and Morgan Wallen? Why not lean into its heritage as an after-church spot and create programs for church groups including discounts and shuttle bus services? Grassroots evangelical support has made huge hits of movies like The Sound of Freedom and restaurant chains like Chick-fil-A. What about a new menu by James Beard? Winning Southern chef Sean Brock? Imagine a public company with leadership that didn't hate the blue-collar evangelical population. There are so many obvious partnership opportunities with brands like NASCAR or country music stars. And brands like NASCAR, country music stars, people with huge followings that also have a similar brand to Cracker Barrel would be happy to support Cracker Barrel in its time of need. He continues, I don't think this is wokeness or girl bossery per se, but rather typical corporate mediocrity, which of course includes those things as they're the path of least resistance. They hired a generic MBA type who built a career on the massive brand equity of Yum Brands and Starbucks, because the now CEO of Cracker Barrel worked for Yum Brands and also worked as an executive at Starbucks. No clear examples of actual branding or operations experience. Just a cog in the corporate machine. I hope we see titans of industry again, but this is not how we'll get them. The CEO's background shows Cracker Barrel full-time for the last 10 months. Prior to that, 5 years and 6 months as the president of Taco Bell, 10 months as senior vice president and general manager at Fisher-Price, which is a little inexplicable, 3 years and a month at Sprinkles Cupcakes, and a few other positions on the board of directors of a few different companies. She has a BA in communications, which is not much of an education, and she completed a certification for Directors College at Stanford Law School. That doesn't make her an attorney. Stanford Law School has what they call a Directors College. It's the nation's premier executive education program for directors and senior executives of publicly traded companies. And for the full story from the New York Post, Cracker Barrel stock in freefall after CEO admits chain just not as relevant as it once was. Do you think maybe it's the CEO's job to make the company relevant? And maybe if the CEO can't do that, they shouldn't be at the company? That's completely correct. Cracker Barrel stock has been in free fall over the past week after its CEO admitted the biscuits-and-gravy chain is just not as relevant as it used to be and failed to show investors a convincing plan to revamp its restaurants. Twitter user Pine Barren has the plan. If they were looking for a plan, they easily would have found his plan, not just on Twitter. This is something marketing people know, advertising people know. Collaborating with other people to network and leverage their customer base is not a unique thing. It's something that you do in business all the time, but that doesn't seem to be the agenda. The 50-year-old roadside eatery with its country store and down-home menu of chicken fried steak, grits, and hash brown casserole has been steadily losing customers for the past decade. Its senior clientele, among its most loyal, fled during the pandemic and may have since failed to return. In response, Cracker Barrel said last Thursday it plans to spend as much as $700 million over the next 3 years. Top brass says the company can fix some of its problems by updating its menu and marketing and refreshing the interior and exterior with a different color palette. $700 million is not something they can afford to spend. It doesn't matter what the amount is. They can afford to spend the amount if they come up with a model that actually works for them. It would be a lot less expensive, though, to just coordinate with church groups and leverage the followings of other brands like NASCAR. But we're just not as relevant as we once were, Chief Executive Julie Fells-Massino said, who took the helm of the company just 9 months ago on an investor call. Some of our recipes and processes haven't evolved for decades. Management, however, also revealed that it doesn't expect the pricey investments will begin to pay off until the second half of 2026 and 2027. The chain slashed its yearly dividend from $1.30 per share to 25 cents a share. The company's shares have been down as much as 20% since the call. Casual dining chains, including Red Lobster, which filed for bankruptcy protection, Applebee's, IHOP, and Olive Garden have been struggling across the board to lure cash-strapped customers. But the CEO said Cracker Barrel has fallen to the middle of the pack, adding, "The reality is we've lost some market share, especially at dinner." Over the past 4 years, Cracker Barrel has lost 16% of its diners, a trend that has continued year to date with a 4% drop in comparable sales during the most recent quarter. Those comparable sales are very important because those compare sales for this period of time versus, let's say, a year ago this period of time. When those sales go down, your costs go up because you've got a basic overhead to cover. So in most situations, in most businesses, lower revenues does mean severely lower profits, and a 4% drop in revenue could mean a 15 or 20% drop in profit. It just depends on the situation, but a small drop in revenue is usually the sign of a big drop in profits. Quote, "A big reason the stock is down is that there wasn't much of a plan," Truist analyst Jake Bartlett told the Post. They announced a plan for a plan, but they didn't give investors enough information to judge whether reinvesting in the stores was a credible plan to address the traffic losses. That's it exactly. The analyst knows what he's talking about. You can't say you have a plan for a plan when you've lost more than half of the value of the company in the last 12 months. Especially not one that's almost as expensive as the value of all of your stock combined. What that tells you essentially is the company isn't viable at its billion-dollar market capitalization. So you'd have to get rid of about $700, maybe $800 billion worth of the value to try to say we've got something worth something. The stock should be down a lot more than 20%. And I'm not giving you investment advice here, but they need to get rid of the CEO, and they need to get rid of her fast. What she sounds like she's doing is deliberately tanking the company, deliberately destroying the existing brand, turning this into maybe the next Sprinkles. Her cupcake chain. I don't think it's going to sell cupcakes, but it's not going to look the same. It's not going to feel the same. It's not going to be the same brand. She'll take the established stores and turn it into something else completely. Major changes. That's the only way I could see logic being applied to what she's doing. Because of course a CEO knows you can't announce a plan for a plan. That's not the kind of thing investors ever want to hear. They want to hear your confidence, your plan, your backup for your plan. They don't expect the plan's necessarily going to work, but they want to think that you think it's going to work, and it should sound like it will probably work. That's what investors want. And they don't want to spend $700 billion if your company is only worth $1 billion. If you spend $10 million or $25 million or even as much as $100 million, but then you start to get some return on that investment, you can continue spending money. But you don't want to plan for $700 million without showing results first. One of its biggest challenges is attracting younger customers. By some measures, about 10% of seniors overall have not returned to their pre-pandemic eating out habits, further increasing the urgency according to Bartlett. Quote, they have a lot of senior customers, so long-term they need to migrate away from that consumer. But courting both seniors and Gen Zers can get complicated. Last year, Cracker Barrel was accused of going woke for lining its front porches with rainbow-colored rocking chairs during Pride Month. Yes, they really did that. Irate customers reacted with a pledge to boycott the 660-store chain. Quote, just run your business and stay out of politics, one commenter posted after Cracker Barrel Instagram one of the rainbow rocking chairs. Others accused the brand of rainbow washing or promoting pro-LGBT messaging for Pride Month purely as a marketing ploy. So you're not allowed to support Pride Month, but you're also not allowed to not support Pride Month. When it comes to attracting a younger clientele, the CEO says she lately has seen a few signs for optimism. Quote, go ahead and Google Cracker Barrel versus Anthropology. Fells Messino told analysts on last week's call. It's a thing, and if you know, you know. TikTok influencer Abby Spinach got more than 100,000 heart emojis and thousands of comments for a series of posts that compared the merchandise at Cracker Barrel's Old Country store to that of the upscale trendy Anthropology chain. In a game she called Cracker Barrel or Anthropology, the influencer challenged followers to guess which dress was from which retailer, concluding herself that Cracker Barrel's clothing scored high marks given its relatively low prices. Quote, I thought it was harder to tell the difference than what I would have thought, the influencer said. Elsewhere, the company has hired consultants and is looking to cut its labor costs in the kitchen by purchasing some prepared ingredients, which should lower the quality and will then further lower the sales. Most of its stores are in rural areas, but some that are in more urban locations might get price increases according to management. There are also plans to make lighting brighter and replace uncomfortable wooden chairs with booths and banquettes. 2 of its stores got a makeover, and another 10 are testing a revamped menu, the company said. Well, Cracker Barrel shared its multi-year strategic plan last week, which includes investing more in our stores to freshen up our approach over time. We are excited about what this means for our guest experience. We believe we'll create substantial value for all our stakeholders and will set the stage for Cracker Barrel to thrive for decades to come. Notice they said stakeholders and not shareholders, and it's the shareholders that are getting absolutely destroyed right now. The CEO, the board of directors should be held responsible when a company's stock absolutely tanks. This is not the right CEO for Cracker Barrel. The right CEO for Cracker Barrel is probably the Pine Barren guy from Twitter. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.